The HOA just made a $47,000 0 cents mistake. They stole it from my 82-year-old grandfather, and now they're trying to take his house. They thought they were preying on a confused Korean War veteran. What they didn't know is they had just picked a fight with his granddaughter, a cybersecurity specialist who traces digital footprints for a living. Every illegal transfer and bogus fee leaves a trail, and they have no idea I know exactly how to follow it. They declared war on the wrong family. Drop a comment if you've ever dealt with an HOA from hell, because what I'm about to show you will blow your mind. My name is Alex Morgan. I'm 34 years old, and before this domestic nightmare unfolded, I genuinely believed the most significant threats to my family's well-being were from foreign cyber terrorists, not the meticulously landscaped tyrants living 3 streets over. Life had thrown me a few curveballs recently. A divorce I hadn't seen coming left me emotionally and financially adrift. Moving back in with my grandfather, Walter, was meant to be a temporary port in the storm, a chance for me to regroup while being close to the only stable father figure I'd ever known. He had been the anchor of our small corner of Willow Creek Estates for over 40 years. This was long before the neighborhood became a status symbol, back when it was a community of working-class families who borrowed cups of sugar and helped each other fix their cars. Walter's house stands on a desirable corner lot, but its real treasure is the sprawling vegetable garden in the backyard. It's a masterpiece of cultivation. We're talking tomatoes the size of softballs, sweet and heavy on the vine, cucumbers so crisp they could feed a family of 4, and enough fragrant herbs to stock a small farmer's market. My grandfather has a kind of magic in his soil-caked fingers. Every morning, the crunch of fallen autumn leaves under his worn leather boots was the neighborhood's natural alarm clock as he made his daily inspection rounds, a mug of coffee in one hand. This garden wasn't just a hobby, it was his sanctuary, his connection to my late grandmother, Eleanor. They had planted the first seeds together the day they moved in, but around 2019, the soul of Willow Creek began to change. New money flowed in, replacing modest ranch-style homes with sprawling, cookie-cutter McMansions. Practical pickup trucks were traded for oversized luxury SUVs that never saw a speck of mud. And with this new wave of residents came Margot Blackwood. Margot is a high-powered real estate agent who speaks of protecting property values with the fervent zeal of a televangelist talking about salvation. At 52, she sports blonde highlights that likely cost more than my monthly car payment, and a smile so dazzlingly artificial it makes you instinctively check your wallet. She purchased the largest new build on Maple Street and immediately began her campaign of neighborhood reorganization. "We need standards," she'd proclaim at her impromptu coffee gatherings, held on her perfectly manicured lawn. "We must protect our investments from decline." 6 months after her arrival, Willow Creek Estates had its first ever homeowners association. The vote was a masterclass in strategic manipulation, scheduled during a freak blizzard on the Tuesday before Thanksgiving, a time when many of the older, long-time residents were either out of town or unable to navigate the treacherous roads. But it passed, and just like that, Margot Blackwood became president of a newly minted HOA, wielding the power to fine, harass, and systematically dismantle the lives of anyone who didn't conform to her vision of suburban perfection. The first shot in her war against my grandfather was fired over his garden. An official-looking letter printed on heavy cardstock with an embossed HOA logo arrived in his mailbox. It declared his 40-year-old vegetable patch a non-compliant landscaping feature and slapped him with a staggering $500 0 cents fine. The metallic taste of pure rage filled my mouth when he later showed me the letter. This garden was Walter's legacy. It was his daily meditation, his connection to my grandmother, and his way of sharing his bounty with the neighborhood kids every summer. Margot wasn't finished. The next letter was even more cruel. It demanded the immediate removal of Walter's wheelchair ramp, which he had painstakingly installed himself in 2018 after a minor stroke. The ramp, according to the HOA, was an unapproved architectural violation that detracted from the neighborhood's aesthetic unity. That ramp was a monument to Walter's fierce independence. He'd refused all offers of help, spending 3 weeks in his garage measuring, cutting, and hammering each board into place. The sound of his labor had been a comfort, a testament to his resilience. I remembered the pride in his voice when he called me, halfway across the world, to describe his finished work. Now it was under attack. Walter showed me the second letter, his hands shaking more than usual, His voice was barely a whisper. Maybe they're right, Alex. This neighborhood is changing. Maybe I'm just too old to keep up. That was the moment I understood. This wasn't about gardens or ramps. This was a calculated campaign of elder displacement designed to push out the original homeowners to make way for Margot's sanitized, high-value vision of suburbia. And I was not going to let that happen. 2 weeks after my return, Margot made her next move. This time, her target was Walter's pride and joy, his 1970 Ford F-150. That truck was more than just transportation. It was a part of Walter's identity. It was a classic, navy blue workhorse with more character than a Hemingway novel. Its dented flatbed had hauled lumber for half the porches in the neighborhood, delivered Christmas trees to families who couldn't afford one, and served as the unofficial moving van for anyone in need. The big red toolbox bolted to the back had helped build tree houses, fix leaky faucets, and probably saved more marriages than most therapists. But according to Margot's newly enacted vehicle aesthetics policy, Walter's beloved truck was now classified as a commercial vehicle being stored in a residential zone. The punishment was a fine of $200 per day until it was removed from the property. I watched from the kitchen window as Margot herself, phone in hand, circled the truck, snapping pictures from every angle like a crime scene photographer. The distinct smell of diesel exhaust mingled with the scent of fresh-cut grass as Walter, oblivious, started the engine. Its familiar, reassuring rumble had been the sound of reliable mornings for over 4 decades. That evening, Margot posted the photos on the official community Facebook page. The caption was designed to incite a mob. Residents of Willow Creek, this is a prime example of what happens when we fail to enforce our community standards. Our property values are a shared responsibility. Let's protect our investment. She had successfully whipped the newer residents into a frenzy about property value degradation. Suddenly, my grandfather's historic truck was public enemy number 1. Comments flooded the post. An absolute eyesore, one new resident wrote. My clients would never buy here if they saw that rusting heap, another chimed in. But here's the thing about fighting people who believe they are intellectually superior. They often underestimate their opponents. While Margot was busy playing social media warrior, I was doing what I do best, digging through digital archives and public records. HOA formation is governed by strict legal procedures, and every state has regulations about how they must be established. I pulled the articles of incorporation, the voting records from that snowy November day, and all the associated proxy authorizations. What I discovered was a blatant act of fraud. Only 40% of eligible households had actually cast a vote to establish the HOA. State law required a 51% quorum for the vote to be legally binding. Margot had bridged the gap using proxy votes from snowbirds, seasonal homeowners who were in Florida or Arizona at the time of the vote. But here was the smoking gun. Those proxy signatures were electronic, supposedly submitted through a secure online portal. The metadata on the digital signature files was irrefutable. They were all created on the same computer, from the same IP address, geotagged to a coffee shop 2 towns over, within a 6-hour window 3 days after the meeting had already occurred. I meticulously documented every irregularity, compiled it into a formal complaint, and filed it with the state board that oversees homeowners associations. Knowledge nugget 1. An HOA's power is not absolute. Its formation requires strict adherence to state law, including majority approval from all eligible residents. Always verify that voting records and proxy authorizations are legitimate. Margot's response was as swift as it was predictable. Within 48 hours, Walter received another letter, this one dripping with fabricated authority. Claimed he had never paid the mandatory one-time HOA initiation fee of $2,000, 0 cents. The invoice was backdated to 2019 and, to my horror, included what appeared to be Walter's digital signature on a payment authorization form he swore he had never seen. Walter stared at the signature on my laptop screen, his weathered face a mask of confusion and distress. Alex, I've never signed anything electronically in my life. I wouldn't even know how to do that. That's when the first chilling pieces of a much larger, more sinister puzzle began to fall into place. Someone hadn't just been harassing my grandfather. They had been stealing his digital identity. And I was about to find out just how deep this rabbit hole went. Margot's next assault was cloaked in the guise of public safety, An anonymous complaint was filed with the HOA about the structural integrity of Walter's roof. This triggered an immediate demand for a professional roof inspection, costing an estimated $15,000 to be completed within 30 days. The penalty for non-compliance was $500 per day. The entire situation reeked of a setup from the moment Margot arrived with her hand-picked inspector. He was a shifty-eyed man in a wrinkled polo shirt who spent more time glancing at his phone than at the actual roof. "Excuse me," I said, standing in the driveway with my arms crossed, blocking his path. "I'm going to need to see your credentials." He looked flustered, patting his pockets before fumbling around in his beat-up truck. He eventually produced a flimsy business card that looked like it had been printed at a gas station. Blackwood Inspection Services, the same last name as Margot. What a stunning coincidence. "And your state contractor's license number?" I pressed. More fumbling. His confidence was visibly evaporating. "I'm still waiting for the new license to come through from the state, a renewal." I pulled out my phone, my expression unyielding. Right there in front of him, I called the state contractor licensing board. 2 minutes and a very helpful state employee later, I had my confirmation. No such company as Blackwood Inspection Services was registered in the state. No license application was on file under his name, and performing unlicensed inspection work for a fee was a Class C felony. The smell of his nervous sweat, mixed with the rich, earthy scent from Walter's compost pile. I watched with grim satisfaction as he packed up his fake clipboard and slunk back to his truck, defeated. By the end of the week, I had hired a legitimate, bonded and insured structural engineer. He spent 3 hours on the property and gave Walter's roof a glowing review. The house was as solid as the day it was built, which was no surprise considering Walter had helped pour the foundation himself back in 1983. But Margot was a master of the pivot. Faster than a politician in an election year, she abandoned the roof narrative and immediately manufactured a pest control emergency, claiming Walter's organic composting setup was attracting rodents. A new HOA letter arrived, this one featuring grainy photos of what they claimed was a rat infestation caused by unsecured environmental hazards on Walter's property. There was just one problem. The photos were laughably obvious stock images downloaded from the internet. I could literally see the watermark from a photography website in the corner of one picture. Walter's compost pile, a source of pride for him, smelled exactly as it should. A healthy mix of coffee grounds, vegetable peels, and the sweet promise of next year's garden. The only rats in this neighborhood were the two-legged variety. The fine for this imaginary infestation? A cool $5,000. That's when our first ally emerged. Evelyn Patterson, a 78-year-old retired school teacher from down the street, knocked on Walter's door. Evelyn was the kind of woman who noticed everything and forgot nothing. She carried a manila folder as thick as a phone book. "Alex, honey," she said, settling into a chair at Walter's kitchen table, her eyes sharp and intelligent. "I've been documenting every single thing that woman has done to the seniors in this neighborhood for the past 6 months. What's happening to Walter is just the tip of the iceberg." Evelyn opened her folder and a clear, disturbing pattern emerged. She had compiled a dossier of systematic harassment targeting the community's elderly residents. The Johnsons on Pine Street had been hit with the same bogus roof inspection scam. The Washingtons, a couple in their 80s, had received identical pest control citations for their bird feeder. Every single case involved seniors who lived alone, had limited family support, and were not comfortable with modern technology. Knowledge nugget 2. When an HOA demands costly inspections or repairs, always demand the contractor's state license number and proof of insurance. This information is public record and can be easily verified through state-run databases. But as Evelyn spoke, another, more sinister pattern began to surface. Every single targeted senior had mentioned the same thing. A very helpful young man from the HOA had recently visited them, offering free assistance with setting up online banking and electronic document systems to make paying dues easier. The same young man who had helped my grandfather just 2 months before I returned from my deployment. Margot's third major assault targeted Walter's solar panels, a system he'd proudly installed in 2015 to cut his electric bill and reduce his carbon footprint. Suddenly, these panels were reclassified as unauthorized utility connections that required immediate removal because they hadn't been pre-approved by the Architectural Review Committee. Never mind that the Architectural Review Committee didn't exist in 2015. Never mind that Walter possessed a folder thick with the proper city permits and signed approvals from the utility company. Margot's letter was unequivocal. The panels had to come down within 30 days, with escalating fines of $1,000, 0 cents per day for non-compliance. The gentle, almost silent whir of the solar panel inverters had become the soundtrack of Walter's mornings, a clean electrical hum that represented his independence and forward-thinking spirit. Now Margot wanted to silence it. I pulled the original installation permits, photographed every official stamp and signature, and documented the complete timeline. The panels were 100% legal, properly installed, and grandfathered in under any new regulations. But then Margot played her trump card. She got her cousin, a mid-level manager in the city code enforcement office, to issue a formal violation notice for the exact same panels that had passed a city inspection with flying colors 7 years earlier. That was the moment I realized this wasn't just a case of HOA overreach. This was coordinated corruption with tentacles reaching directly into our local city government. Margot's real estate company stood to gain a significant financial windfall every time an elderly resident was harassed into selling their home, and she had family members positioned in key agencies to help her make it happen. While I was building our legal defense, I began tracking the HOA's financial transactions. Publicly available records showed some interesting patterns. Every time an elderly resident paid a large fine or was forced to sell their house, the HOA made large consulting payments to a shell company called Blackwood Development Group, LLC. 3 guesses who owned it. The real bombshell, however, came when Walter showed me his latest bank statement. $8,000 in retroactive monthly HOA fees, dating all the way back to 2019, had been automatically deducted from his checking account. The HOA produced payment records showing Walter had agreed to these electronic withdrawals, complete with digital authorizations he swore he had never, ever made. Walter's hands shook as he pointed to the withdrawal dates on the statement. "Alex, I've never authorized an automatic payment in my life. I don't trust computers with my money. I pay my bills with checks." The pattern was now terrifyingly clear. Someone with direct access to Walter's banking information and his digital identity was systematically draining the accounts of elderly residents while simultaneously building a fraudulent paper trail of authorizations to cover their tracks. Every illicit transaction showed the same digital signature, was routed through the same IP address, and had timestamps clustering around late Friday afternoons and weekends, times when banks were closed and transaction confirmations wouldn't be processed or noticed until Monday morning. Knowledge nugget 3. HOA rules and fees cannot be applied retroactively to pre-existing installations or improvements. Any attempt to do so is legally invalid and a potential indicator of fraudulent activity. That night, I sat in Walter's basement office, the room illuminated only by the blue glow of my 3 computer monitors. The air smelled of old electronics and dust. Evelyn Patterson's words echoed in my head about the helpful young man who had spent an hour with Walter, setting up his online banking and installing special security software to protect him from hackers. I was beginning to suspect that the biggest security threat wasn't an external hacker trying to get in, it was the helpful insider who was already there. It was time to find out exactly what kind of help my grandfather had received. The malware was elegant, I had to give them that. It was a beautifully crafted Trojan horse, hidden deep within Walter's computer system and cleverly disguised as a legitimate piece of HOA-compliant software. It was a keylogger, capturing every password, every bank transaction, and every digital signature Walter made. I found it buried in a folder labeled Willow Creek _Security Suite, installed 3 months prior by someone with full administrator access to Walter's computer. The installation log was precise. It happened on a Saturday afternoon, the exact day Walter had received help from that charming, helpful young man from the HOA. This was no amateur operation. The malware was sophisticated and insidious. It not only captured banking credentials and duplicated digital signature files, but was also programmed to take periodic screenshots during sensitive online transactions. Every single piece of Walter's digital life had been compromised and stolen. The metadata from the malware's command control server led me to its source, Tyler Blackwood, age 24, Margot Blackwood's son. According to his polished social media profiles, he was a self-employed cybersecurity consultant who specialized in senior citizen online protection services. Tyler had been making house calls throughout Willow Creek Estates, offering his free computer help to the neighborhood's elderly residents. What he was actually doing was installing a digital crowbar that gave him complete access to their financial lives. I began to trace the digital footprints, and they spread like a virus across 3 counties. I uncovered a network affecting at least 47 seniors. The total amount stolen, as far as I could calculate, was over $380,000, 0 cents. Every victim told the same story: a helpful young man, a free computer setup, mysterious bank withdrawals, and a sudden onslaught of HOA harassment that coincidentally began right after the new security software was installed. Walter sat in his worn kitchen chair, staring at the printouts of evidence I had spread across the table. The relief in his voice was heartbreaking. So I'm not losing my mind? I really didn't authorize those payments. No, Grandpa, I said, my hand on his shoulder. You've been the victim of a very sophisticated and cruel scam, one that was designed to make you think you were forgetting things. Evelyn Patterson had tears in her eyes when I showed her the findings. Tyler had helped her too, installing the same malware on her laptop and gaining access to her modest retired teacher's pension. This was so much bigger than HOA harassment. This was systematic, predatory elder fraud, using the HOA as a weapon and a cover story. Margot's real estate company had already acquired 12 homes from delinquent HOA members who couldn't keep up with the escalating fines and mysterious bank withdrawals. The pattern was surgical in its precision: target elderly residents who lived alone, compromise their digital security, drain their bank accounts through fraudulent HOA fees and backdated charges, and then, when they were financially and emotionally broken, force them to sell their homes at below-market prices directly to Margot's company. Knowledge nugget. 4. Never allow a stranger, especially one with a vested interest, to install software on your personal computer. Legitimate security software comes from established, reputable companies, not from door-to-door service providers offering free help. For the first time since this nightmare began, I felt a surge of adrenaline. Not of anger, but of purpose. My cybersecurity expertise wasn't just useful anymore, it was the key that would unravel this entire criminal operation. But I couldn't do it alone. Taking down a network this sophisticated and corrupt would require more than just digital evidence. I needed a team of allies who understood financial crimes, elder abuse law, and the power of public exposure. It was time to assemble my own task force and turn the tables on Margot Blackwood's suburban empire. Building a formidable case against an organized elder fraud ring requires the right team. I was lucky. My time in the military and consulting had connected me with people who specialized in exactly this kind of fight. Evelyn Patterson became my director of human intelligence. At 78 years old, with the sharp investigative instincts of a seasoned detective, she had already done months of groundwork. Her weekly coffee clatches with the neighborhood seniors transformed into unofficial intelligence briefings where victims shared their stories and, under her guidance, began collecting their own evidence. Detective Ray Kowalski was a former colleague from my cybersecurity consulting days who had left the private sector for the financial crimes division of the state police. Ray had been tracking disparate elder fraud networks across the state. He was thrilled and disturbed to find a case with such a clear, centralized digital evidence trail. "Alex, what you've uncovered here is bigger than just your neighborhood," Ray explained, his pen flying across his notepad as we met at a diner far from Willow Creek. "This pattern of malware and HOA pressure matches reports we've been getting from suburban communities across 3 counties. Tyler and Margot aren't working alone. They're part of a franchise." Marcus Webb was our legal powerhouse, a fierce civil rights attorney who specialized in elder abuse cases and, more importantly, RICO violations. When I laid out the evidence, the coordinated action, the shell companies, the wire fraud, his eyes lit up like it was Christmas morning. "This isn't just fraud, Alex. This is racketeering," he said, the smell of fresh legal documents and brewing coffee filling his office. "We're looking at organized criminal activity using a legitimate-seeming entity, the HOA, as a front. We can go after them under federal law. That means asset forfeiture and treble damages." Jennifer Santos, a sharp, tenacious investigative journalist for the local TV station, completed our team. Jennifer had been reporting on HOA abuse stories for years and knew exactly how to time media exposure with legal action for maximum impact and public protection. Our strategy was a 3-pronged assault. 1. Legal action. A massive civil lawsuit and coordination with law enforcement to stop the fraud, recover every stolen dollar, and dismantle the organization. 2. Media exposure. A carefully timed investigative report to expose the scam, protecting other potential victims across the state. 3. Law enforcement. A coordinated takedown with state and federal agencies to ensure the criminal charges would stick. Marcus explained our legal leverage. Pattern evidence in fraud cases like this is incredibly powerful. Instead of 47 individual cases, we're framing this as a single criminal conspiracy. The RICO statute allows us to sue for triple the actual damages, plus all attorney fees. Ray outlined the digital forensics. Every electronic transaction leaves metadata. Tyler's malware, in its arrogance, kept detailed logs of every keystroke, every password, every bank transfer. He essentially created a perfect time-stamped confession of his own crimes. Jennifer planned the media rollout. We hold the story until the arrest warrants are served. The moment they're in custody, we air the investigation. The public exposure of the scam will be immense, protecting countless other seniors from falling victim to similar operations. Knowledge Nugget 5. Elder fraud protection starts with education. Never give remote computer access to a stranger. Always independently verify financial transactions with your bank and report any suspicious activity immediately to both local police and your state's elder abuse hotline. Our technical plan was elegantly simple. We would allow Tyler and Margot to continue their operation, all while we documented everything in the background. We would spring the trap only when we had irrefutable evidence of ongoing criminal activity. Evelyn organized a senior cybersecurity education session at the local library, a brilliant cover for teaching the other victims how to recognize and report the fraud attempts. 23 elderly neighbors showed up, many carrying laptops that the helpful Tyler had worked on. Every single one was infected with the same keylogging malware. Marcus began preparing the civil asset forfeiture paperwork, targeting Margot's real estate company accounts, her home, her cars, and every asset purchased with the proceeds of their crimes. Ray coordinated with federal financial crimes investigators, linking our local case to the broader interstate fraud patterns. This was no longer just about Willow Creek Estates. It was about protecting elderly communities everywhere. Our greatest weapon, however, was Margot and Tyler's own arrogance. We let them think they were winning. The best way to catch criminals is to give them enough rope to hang themselves, and we were about to find out just how much rope they needed. Margot must have sensed that the ground was shifting beneath her feet because she accelerated her timeline with the wild desperation of a gambler doubling down on a losing hand. The HOA called a sudden emergency meeting and, with only her cronies present, voted to foreclose on Walter's house within 72 hours. Never mind that a legal foreclosure requires months of due process. Margot invoked non-existent emergency provisions in the bylaws, citing imminent health and safety violations. The proof for these violations materialized the very next morning. The faint, ozone smell of an electrical arc filled Walter's kitchen. Tyler had paid a visit during the night, under the pretense of inspecting the exterior electrical meter. In reality, he had sabotaged the main electrical panel. I watched it all on the high-definition security cameras I had installed the week before. Tyler's face was clearly visible in the infrared light as he deliberately loosened critical wires, creating the very fire hazard the HOA would later use as justification for their emergency condemnation. But Tyler wasn't done. I watched from Walter's living room window as he made his rounds, heading directly for Evelyn Patterson's house, laptop bag in hand, likely planning to install an updated, more aggressive version of his malware. He never saw me coming. Tyler Blackwood, I presume. I stepped out from behind Evelyn's perfectly manicured gardenia bushes as he approached her back door. He nearly dropped his expensive laptop. "I'm sorry, do I know you?" "Oh, we're about to get very well acquainted," I said, my voice calm but cold. "I'm Alex Morgan, Walter Miller's granddaughter. I've been so looking forward to meeting the young man who's been so helpful with our neighborhood's computer security." Tyler's face cycled through several shades of pale as the realization hit him. I'm just here to help Mrs. Patterson with some software updates." "The same kind of software updates you installed on my grandfather's computer?" I took a step closer. "The ones that log every keystroke and bank password?" Right on cue, Evelyn Patterson opened her back door. "Tyler, dear, I've been expecting you, but I'm afraid I won't be needing your computer help today. Or ever again." The acrid smell of fierce sweat mixed with the morning dew as Tyler understood his entire operation had been exposed. He stammered, trying to play it off as a misunderstanding, but the laptop bag full of malware-oded USB drives told the real story. Meanwhile, Margot was pulling her last strings of corrupt influence. The city inspector, her cousin, showed up at Walter's house with an official condemnation notice, declaring the property uninhabitable due to severe electrical hazards, the same hazards Tyler had created less than 12 hours earlier. But here's the beauty of a coordinated plan. Detective Ray was already positioned across the street in an unmarked car, documenting every step of the corruption chain. He had photos, video, and audio recordings of the entire exchange, proving the collusion between the HOA, the city official, and the fraud operation. Knowledge nugget 6. You can legally install security cameras on your own property without providing notice. They are one of the most effective, non-confrontational tools for documenting harassment, trespassing, and other criminal activity. That afternoon, Margot, in a final act of hubris, attempted to intimidate other elderly residents into silence. She went door to door, spinning a tale about Walter's criminal granddaughter who was committing elder abuse by questioning his financial decisions and isolating him. She had no idea that half the neighbors she spoke to were wearing miniature recording devices provided by Detective Ray, capturing every word of her witness intimidation campaign. My evidence package was now complete. We had them on systematic fraud, felony elder abuse, federal computer crimes, racketeering, and now witness intimidation. The only question left was whether to arrest them immediately or let them dig their hole just a little bit deeper. I chose deeper. Sometimes, the most satisfying way to catch a criminal is to let them march triumphantly to their own execution. Margot's final gambit was as predictable as it was pathetic. She filed for an emergency restraining order against me, claiming I was the one elder abusing Walter. According to her sworn petition, I was an unstable, recently divorced military contractor who had forcibly moved in with my grandfather to seize control of his finances and isolate him from his concerned community. The restraining order sought to legally prevent me from accessing Walter's bank accounts, speaking to him about his finances, or attending any HOA meetings. Simultaneously, Tyler launched a smear campaign on social media, posting libelous stories on neighborhood Facebook groups and Nextdoor forums about my questionable military background and a fabricated history of financial exploitation. In his narrative, Walter was a confused elderly man being cruelly manipulated by his greedy, domineering granddaughter. To cap it all off, the HOA scheduled an emergency auction of Walter's house for the following Friday, claiming the imminent health hazards required immediate resolution. Margot's real estate company would, naturally, be handling the sale and had already pre-qualified a list of interested buyers. But every move they made had been anticipated, documented, and countered. I allowed Margot to believe her restraining order had neutralized me. I ceased all direct contact and worked exclusively through my attorney, Marcus Webb. Maintaining the public appearance of compliance, we moved Walter to a comfortable, temporary assisted living facility, a strategic choice that removed him from the immediate conflict zone while ensuring his safety. The antiseptic smell of the facility couldn't mask Walter's heartbreak as he packed a small overnight bag. "Alex," he said, his voice heavy with defeat, "maybe I should just sell the house. I'm so tired of fighting." "Grandpa, this isn't a retreat. It's a strategic repositioning," I told him, using the military jargon he understood. "We're not fighting anymore. We're finishing this. And when it's over, you are going home to your garden." Evelyn Patterson became my eyes and ears, attending HOA meetings and reporting every detail of Margot's increasingly erratic behavior. The pressure was clearly getting to her. Evelyn reported that Margot had started drinking during the day and was making wild accusations in public about outside agitators and criminal conspiracies against her. Detective Ray used the time to finalize the arrest warrants and coordinate with federal investigators. The case had officially crossed state lines, as Tyler's malware network had been discovered in senior communities in 2 neighboring states, making it a federal cybercrime investigation. Marcus completed the massive civil asset forfeiture paperwork and the class action lawsuit documentation. 47 plaintiffs, detailed financial records, and a crystal-clear pattern of organized criminal activity. The case was airtight. Jennifer Santos prepared her explosive investigative report, with camera crews on standby, ready to roll the moment the arrests were made. The story would be timed to air on the evening news, maximizing public awareness and serving as a warning to other potential victims. My final evidence package was a masterpiece of digital forensics. Bank records, malware analysis, wiretapped conversations, video surveillance, and documented proof of coordination between all the players. Tyler and Margot had unwittingly provided enough evidence to convict themselves twice over. But the piece de resistance was yet to come. Margot, drunk on her perceived victory, was planning a celebration at the upcoming annual HOA meeting. She intended to announce the successful removal of problem residents and unveil her grand plans for the neighborhood's upgrades. She had no idea she was about to be the guest of honor at her own takedown. Knowledge Nugget 7. Frivolous or malicious restraining orders can be challenged and defeated with proper legal representation and evidence. In fact, false allegations of elder abuse can dramatically strengthen your position when the real abuse is thoroughly documented. Friday morning arrived with the crisp promise of autumn justice and the sweet, delicious anticipation of watching bullies get exactly what they deserve. The Willow Creek Estates Community Center had never seen a crowd like this. Word had spread like wildfire about the HOA's emergency meeting to discuss the foreclosure. Residents, both old and new, packed the rows of folding chairs, while Jennifer Santos's local news crews quietly set up their cameras in the back of the room. Margot Blackwood stood at the podium, resplendent in a crimson power suit, her blonde hair perfectly coiffed. She radiated the smug confidence of a conqueror who believed she had already won the war. She had charts and graphs projecting property value improvements and PowerPoint slides detailing her successful community management initiatives. "Ladies and gentlemen, neighbors," Margot announced, her voice ringing with satisfaction, "I am so pleased to report the successful removal of several problem properties that were dragging down our community's standards and property values. Today marks a glorious new chapter for Willow Creek Estates." The flash of camera bulbs illuminated her triumphant smile as she clicked to a slide showing an architectural rendering of a new modern duplex on the lot where Walter's house currently stood. That's when I walked through the front door. I wasn't alone. I was flanked by Detective Ray Kowalski on one side and two uniformed federal agents on the other. Jennifer Santos's camera crew swung around to capture our entrance. A collective gasp swept through the room. The murmur of the shocked crowd mixed with the whir of camera motors as every head turned toward us. Margot's confident smile faltered when she saw me, then completely evaporated when she spotted Detective Ray's badge and the federal agents behind him. "Margaret Blackwood," Ray's voice boomed with the unmistakable authority of 15 years in law enforcement, "you are under arrest for violations of the Racketeer Influence and Corrupt Organizations Act, conspiracy to commit wire fraud, and felony elder abuse." Tyler, who had been sitting in the front row, tried to bolt for a side exit but found his path blocked by two more agents who had been waiting for exactly that move. The sharp metallic click of handcuffs snapping shut echoed through the suddenly silent room. "But first," I said, walking calmly to the front of the room as Ray read a stunned Margot her Miranda rights, "let me show this community what's really been going on in Willow Creek Estates." I connected my laptop to the projector. The image of the new duplex was replaced by irrefutable evidence, bank records showing $380,000, 0 cents, stolen from 47 elderly residents, screenshots of Tyler's key-logging malware capturing passwords in real time, and the crown jewel, audio recordings of Margot on the phone with a potential buyer discussing her strategy of cleaning out the old folks to make room for more profitable property. The HOA was never about community standards, I announced to the packed room and the rolling cameras. It was a criminal enterprise, a front organization designed to systematically defraud elderly residents and steal their homes. Evelyn Patterson stood up in the front row, her voice carrying the clear, commanding authority of a beloved schoolteacher. "I have personally documented every fraudulent fine, every act of harassment, and every intimidation tactic for the last 6 months. 47 of our neighbors were victims of this organized crime operation." Margot's complete and total breakdown was captured in high definition for the evening news. She screamed about conspiracies, political persecution, and outside agitators. Her carefully constructed facade of suburban elegance crumbled into raw, ugly desperation. "You want to talk about property values?" I asked the crowd as a weeping Tyler was led away in handcuffs. "They're about to go up significantly because this community just proved that bullies, thieves, and predators don't belong in Willow Creek Estates." The mic drop moment came when Detective Ray took the podium again to announce the recovery of the stolen funds. "Thanks to the detailed financial forensics in this case, we have traced and frozen over $380,000, 0 cents in stolen assets. Under federal RICO statutes, these funds, plus significant additional damages, will be returned to the victims of this scheme." The sound of spontaneous, thunderous applause filled the room, mixing with the click of camera shutters as residents realized their long nightmare was finally over. But the best moment of all came when my grandfather, Walter Miller, walked slowly but steadily through the front door. He had insisted on being here, leaving his assisted living exile for this moment. The entire room rose to its feet, giving him a standing ovation as he made his way to the front. He took the microphone, his voice stronger and clearer than I'd heard it in months. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said, looking out at the faces of his neighbors, "this is what happens when a community stands together against bullies. And this," he said, turning to wink at me, "is what happens when my granddaughter gets mad." 6 months later, Willow Creek Estates felt like a completely different neighborhood, not because of forced aesthetic conformity or HOA harassment, but because people were actually talking to each other again. A genuine sense of community had been forged in the fire of shared adversity. Margot and Tyler were each sentenced to 5 years in federal prison with full restitution ordered. The HOA was formally dissolved by a state judge, and all its fraudulent fines and liens were declared null and void. The 12 homes that had been improperly seized or sold under duress were, through a complex but successful legal battle led by Marcus Webb, returned to their rightful owners or their families. Walter came home from his temporary residence to find the entire neighborhood had organized a massive welcome home block party. The street was closed off, and the air, once thick with tension, now smelled of barbecue smoke and freshly baked cookies. It was a joyous, cathartic celebration that lasted long past midnight, filled with the sounds of children's laughter and neighbors reconnecting. Evelyn Patterson was unanimously elected president of the newly formed and entirely voluntary Willow Creek Community Association. She accepted the position on one condition: that all meetings must include coffee and her famous homemade oatmeal raisin cookies. Her first initiative was to establish a senior watch program, not to look for burglars, but to educate residents on how to spot and report the kinds of scams that had targeted them. Walter's garden became his masterpiece that summer. Neighbors, new and old, stopped by daily, not to complain but to admire his magnificent tomatoes, to ask for gardening tips, and simply to listen to his stories about the old days. He started a small kids' corner in the garden, teaching the neighborhood children the magic of growing their own food. The sound of their laughter as they pulled up their first carrots became the new soundtrack of the neighborhood. I decided to stay in Willow Creek for good. I resigned my commission and started a local cybersecurity consulting business, specializing in protecting seniors from digital fraud. The demand was overwhelming. It turned out that Tyler and Margot's operation was just one tentacle of a much larger network of elder fraud in the region. Detective Ray and I discovered that our professional partnership translated remarkably well to our personal lives. He proposed to me one perfect Sunday morning, right there, in the middle of Walter's garden, with the sweet smell of blooming tomato plants in the air and the sound of distant church bells carrying on the breeze. But the real, lasting victory was the community initiative that grew out of our ordeal. We established Walter's Warriors, a nonprofit organization that provides free technology support, software installation, and fraud protection education for elderly residents throughout the county. We partnered with local banks, law enforcement agencies, and senior centers to create a model program that has since been adopted by communities in 3 neighboring states. The annual Walter Chen Community Festival, held every September in the local park, now draws hundreds of families. It's a celebration not just of our victory over corruption, but of the resilient power of neighbors looking out for one another. We also established a scholarship fund in my grandfather's name. It sends 2 local high school graduates to cybersecurity programs each year, with one simple requirement: that they spend their summers volunteering their time to teach digital safety skills to senior citizens. It's a beautiful, self-sustaining cycle, protecting the generation that built our communities while training the next generation to defend against future threats. Evelyn's weekly Scam Alert email newsletter has become required reading for thousands of seniors across the county, featuring real-world examples of recent fraud attempts and simple step-by-step instructions for protecting personal information. Last week, I got a call from a community in Oregon. They were facing an eerily similar pattern of HOA harassment targeting their elderly residents. They had seen Jennifer Santos's award-winning news report online and were hoping I could help. I'm flying out next month to help them build their own defense strategy. Walter's morning walks are now a neighborhood institution. The familiar crunch of leaves under his boots signals the start of each new day. His wheelchair ramp, the one Margot tried so desperately to tear down, has been joined by 3 others on our street, as our community has come to embrace accessibility instead of hiding from it. My favorite moment of each day comes in the evening, when Walter sits on that ramp, watching the sunset and waving to neighbors walking their dogs. The sound of his contented sighs mixes with the gentle evening breeze rustling through the leaves of his vegetable garden, the garden that started this whole fight and ended up saving an entire community. You know what I really learned from all this, Alex? Walter asked me last night, as we sat together watching fireflies dance around his tomato plants. Sometimes, the best way to protect what you love is to be willing to fight for it. And sometimes, the most important part of the fight is just remembering you're not fighting alone. The scent of fresh basil and the distant sound of kids playing kickball in the street reminded me why this victory was so profound. It wasn't just about stopping fraud or recovering money. It was about proving that ordinary people, united in purpose, can defend themselves and their community. So here's my challenge to everyone reading this. If you have an HOA nightmare story, share it, drop it in the comments, detail the tactics, name the strategies, and let other people know what to watch out for. Every story shared is another family armed with the knowledge to protect themselves. And if this story helped you, hit that subscribe button. I have more cases to share, more lessons to teach, because the unfortunate truth is that bullies and predators count on good people being too intimidated, too isolated, or too overwhelmed to fight back. But when a community stands together, armed with knowledge and determination, those bullies discover they've picked the wrong neighborhood to terrorize. Now go check on your elderly neighbors. Help them update their computer security. And most importantly, make sure they know they are not fighting alone.